Hey guys, I'm making this video both out of excitement and out of concern for one of my favorite champions, Vladimir. I was waiting for the patch notes to come out, the patch 1.16 I believe it was, and it's standard ritual for me. A new patch comes out, the first thing I do is I hit Ctrl F on my keyboard, I type in Vladimir, and usually the result I get is literally no results. So the reason why I waited was because I want to talk about the Scar Grounds and what it means for Vladimir in particular. Because as we all know, Vladimir has not been in the best spot for, well, more than just a little while. He has received some buffs, multiple buffs in fact, but all those buffs still did not compensate for the nerf that Crimson Disciple received, where she got her damage to Nexus reduced from 2 damage to 1 damage. This was mainly to nerf aggro decks, but naturally it hurt Vladimir in a pretty substantial way too, where he is kind of stuck between this Zoo-type deck, aggro deck. He just wants to fill the board and consistently generate value. And that is actually kind of where the problem is with Vladimir, in my opinion. He is stuck between multiple ways that deck wants to be played, but none of them work very well. So before I just completely ramble on already, what I want to do is in this video is give my thoughts on some of the new cards that are specifically for Vladimir, and what that means and what that does for Vladimir in this new expansion. Also, the future for Vladimir, if there's any changes we can make to him to make him feel better, be more playable, who knows, maybe even an entire redesign of the champion, because let's be honest, the self-damage thing, it's not really working out so far. And lastly, I have some deck lists and ideas that I'm going to play with Vladimir in the first week of the new expansion. Okay, so let's start with the most exciting new addition, the Scar Grounds. The 3-mana landmark for Freljord, when an ally survives damage, grant it +1, +0, and tough. So that's really good, right? Like the first thing people are going to think when they see this card is, oh, this is great with the Crimson deck. And yes, it is. This is going to be a great addition, but there are some problems I have with this, because like I said, Vladimir is meant to be played as kind of a zoo-type deck. When Vladimir attacks, you want to have as many minions as possible that attack with him to deal 1 damage to them that goes to the enemy nexus and to generate value, hopefully. You get a unit from the Crimson Curator, you deal damage with the Crimson Disciple. Who knows, maybe you have a Vrienna or a Scartane Stefan, I forgot the exact name, that buff their stats when they get damaged. And the Scar Grounds is great for this, because you kind of get like this additional value. The problem is that, like I said, Vladimir wants to be played in a Zoo-type deck, and the Scar Grounds is a landmark. So not only does this take up an entire spot on the board that is there, well, forever, unless your opponent removes it or unless you override it, which isn't really something that I think you're going to be able to do. Another problem with this is that the spot it takes up on the board, but also the fact that Vladimir decks are not very well known for their card draw at all. I've tried to put in some Trifarian Assessors in my Vladimir decks, but that's actually like the only card draw that the deck provides. There is nothing else. Vladimir decks are meant to be played as more of a generation style deck, where you use the Crimson Curator to get multiple Crimson units in your hand. This only gets you so far, because at a certain point they're gonna give you some diminishing returns. Like you can get a handful of either the Crimson Awakeners, you can get a handful of the Crimson Curators, and at one point you're going to run out of activators, or you're going to get a handful of the Crimson Aristocrat, I want to say. Forgot the name, sorry. The 2/2 that deals 1 damage to a unit and gives it +2 attack. And, well, you can see the problem here, right? Vladimir decks have not been that good because the units have not been that good. So what does generating those units actually do for you? I think it'd be much better if you were just able to cycle through your deck a little bit better, like give some minor card draw for, like, I don't care, maybe in exchange for some power to actually play the deck on a more consistent level. It's fun generating units from the Crimson Curator. It feels really good. I like doing it. But I really hope that a simple card, like even a Crimson unit that would read, whenever I take damage, draw a card. Make it a 1/2 for all I care, so you actually have to put some resources in it to keep it alive and make it feel more fair if you want to cycle through your deck. you have to spend something on it. You have to spend your cards to cycle. The other problem with the landmark is it does give the units tough. That does make generating that value a little bit more consistent. And obviously this is good for combat too. Like tough is just a great keyword to have. Granting your Vladimir tough and having it have regen eventually, or having tough on a Crimson Curator, are all pretty insane and are gonna make generating that value a lot more consistent because your transfusion now deals 0 damage. But another thing about that is that when you are trying to surprise your opponent, there isn't really a way to do it because you need to damage your unit first before it gets tough. So let's say you have a 5/5, your 5/5 Vladimir is trading with a 5/5 from your opponent. You think, okay, well maybe there's, you know, a way to give my Vladimir tough in combat. But it doesn't work that way. You have to deal 1 damage at least to Vladimir first for it to get tough. At which point it becomes a 4 health Vladimir against your 5 attack opponent. So that means that the trade is still even. There's no combat tricks you can do with this. It's a very fair way to gain tough. You have to give tough and then you have to start generating that value. So that means it's not like you play 1 card, but you have to do more than that to actually get a benefit out of that tough. And maybe I'm being too straightforward with this. Maybe it's actually insane. Maybe it's super easy to give something tough and your Crimson units will completely take over combat. But I don't really see it that way. So the other problem that I mentioned earlier is the card draw. When you have the Scar Grounds on the board, that's enough. You only need 1 because the +1 attack is kind of irrelevant. You're only playing this for the tough effect so you can generate value easier with your Crimson units. So once you grant tough, you get the 1 attack, and yeah, that's kind of nice, I guess, especially if you can get overwhelmed somehow. That's really the only way I can see it being relevant, actually, by giving overwhelm to your units somehow. So maybe there's a Riven deck with Vladimir somewhere that makes this deck able to close out games a little bit easier. So once you get that tough, you don't really care about the landmark anymore. The other problem is, what if you draw multiple landmarks in your hand? If you have 2 landmarks on the board and you deal 1 damage, you grant tough and +2 attack. But like I said, you only play the card for the tough effect. I hope you see where I'm going with this. If you only care about that 1 tough effect, having 2 landmarks does nothing. And in a deck that has limited draw, but does more with generating units in hand, what does that second landmark do for you? Most of the time, it's just going to be stuck in your hand, because first of all, you don't want to spend 3 mana on an effect that does virtually nothing for you, because you don't care about the 1 attack. And second of all, you don't want to take up that board space, because it's a board-centric deck. You're going to more likely overwrite that landmark at some point to play your Crimson units that you're generating. Going wide is very important with Vladimir, and I don't think that's an aspect that many people really grasp. They really play for the value, and they hope to overwhelm their opponent early by all the units that you're playing on your board, and really, you have to win early game, which makes it more of an aggro deck that lost its power to close out games, because if you're going to try to generate value with the Curator, there's decks that just do that much better, like Invoke decks. I would say that the 1/2 Solari Priestess is a lot better than the Curator. You play her, and the only effect you need when you play her is Daybreak, to activate the effect, I mean. Curator, you need to put so much effort into getting that self-damage going, and in my opinion, Celestial cards are a lot better than Crimson cards, no matter what deck you're playing. I know a 3/3 body is better than a 1/2 body, but you get the point. You'd rather invoke something to do something much more powerful later than you would get another Crimson unit that you might or might not get value out of. So those are my main concerns. Board space and limited card draw are really going to hold this landmark back. That kind of got me thinking, right? For example, when you have a Vladimir on the board, and you draw a Vladimir, he turns into a transfusion. I'm wondering how hard would it have been for Riot to take the same approach with landmarks? What if Scar Grounds turned into a Troll Chant? I don't know, I'm just naming a card, that's pretty good. What if Scar Grounds turned into an Elixir of Iron? When you draw the second one and you already have one on the board. That would make it feel so much better. Like, just shuffle one back into your deck and everybody's happy. I know that could create some design issues, but I still think that it will make decks like this a lot better. And also it might help balance the Starspring decks a little bit, because you can remove one, but then the other one is still going to keep going and get to that 22 health benchmark to win the game eventually. With that approach, the Tomcat Shiraka decks would really have to put everything in one of the Star Springs, and if it gets removed, well, tough on them, but let's be honest, the win con doesn't always feel great to lose to. And that leaves us with some of the other cards that got revealed in his expansion. Let's start with Transfusion itself. We had Sharpsight revealed last season, and it's become a staple in most Demacia decks. It's a very, very good card, but if you compare Sharpsight to Transfusion, Sharpsight is almost always strictly better unless you're playing it in a Crimson deck. And I know this isn't really a fair comparison to make because dealing 1 damage at burst speed is very valuable for Vladimir decks. But still, I feel like if you're paying for something that is technically a downside, shouldn't you get some additional effects? Maybe it should be +2, +3. And I know back in the days this would have made aggro decks go completely out of control. But I'm still missing something here, and it's just one of those small things, it's one of many small things that are just holding Vladimir back. And then the other card that got released, Iterative Improvement. Pick a follower, create a copy of it in hand with +1/+1 for 2 mana at burst speed. Now let's compare that to a card that was supposed to go into Vladimir decks, Blood for Blood. 2 mana fast speed, deal 1 to an allied follower. If it survives, create a copy of it in hand. This card is just, the fact it's fast speed just makes it strictly worse, even if the 1 damage ping can be an upside for Vladimir decks. And realize that this card used to be 3 mana, it got buffed to 2 mana a while ago, and now Piltover gets a 2 mana burst spell with the same effect and gives it +2/+2. +1/+1 in hand. I can't wrap my mind around this. Vladimir decks are already weak, and then it's just such blatant power creep, kind of. Like, don't get me wrong. I think the Runeterra devs are doing a fantastic job. I just don't know what they're so afraid of with Vladimir. There's multiple directions they can go with this. They can just straight up buff some of the cards, but I think Vladimir just needs an entirely different approach. I hope they can make him spell-based, more or less, because the self-damage, it's fun, but it makes it so unit-based. And that's a real shame. Like, Vladimir is this Hemomancer. It just makes sense if he does more with blood magic. Like, what if he had a mechanic that, like, this is a completely wild redesign type of deal, where if he survives, for the amount of damage he survives, gain spell mana. It's kind of like the Tortured Prodigy, but maybe if he's leveled up, you have that same effect where he gets spell mana, but every time he survives, he creates a transfusion in hand. So you can kind of like keep pinging and keep buffing your units, and I guess on paper that'd be kind of broken, but I'm just saying the direction of having Vladimir be more spell-based would actually make a lot of sense, because there's only 4 Crimson units and only two of them generate value, the Curator and the Disciple. So this is mainly why I made this video, just to give my thoughts on the Scar Grounds and where I see Vladimir in the future, because right now I just don't see it solving all the problems that Vladimir decks have. The fact it's a landmark already makes it kind of clunky, and the fact that if you draw a second copy, it's completely redundant. It's just a bit of a shame, really. Doesn't mean I'm any less excited, I'm still going to love playing the deck, I still think it's going to be an upgrade, but I think the Runeterra devs can do better when it comes to Vladimir. And yes, this video has been full of hot takes, and maybe I'm completely wrong and Scar Grounds makes Vladimir a tier 1 deck. I just don't see it. I hope I'm wrong. Let me know what you think though in the comments. Where do you expect Scar Grounds to leave Vladimir when it comes to his decks? And lastly, I have some deck lists that I cooked up that I'm going to be playing on the first day of the expansion. I'm going to put them all on the screen. There's 3 in total. 1 with Riven, 1 with the Yetis, a deck that I played before, but instead of Field of Rush, it's playing Scar Grounds. The deck has already been kind of good, so I think this is just a strict improvement. And another Vladimir Braum deck that, who knows, it's an old classic. Who knows, maybe Scar Grounds will actually make that deck just competitive. And I know there's a lot of Vladimir fanatics that will tell me, no, the best way to play him is this, no, the best way to play him is that. And please, do sound off, because I'm very interested in what your ideas are, and I want to hear them all in the comments and try them out for myself. I'm a Vladimir fanatic too. Maybe not as much as some others, but I do really, really like his design in Runeterra, and I hope he gets some justice. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts, and I guess just my big rant about Vladimir and where he's left when it came to the design choices from the Runeterra devs. Once again, they're fantastic. I think they're doing an amazing job. I just want to play Vladimir. But yeah, look forward to some gameplay videos when the expansion comes out. I have a bunch of stuff that I'm going to upload, working on several different projects that you can probably expect to appear over the next few weeks. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow with a gameplay video, and I hope you enjoyed the expansion as much as I will. See you there.